All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're closing in on it. We've got 2 weeks to go. Uh, Most of that time will be spent on the floor. Most of the committees have shut down now. There might be a few that they need to run something through some of the more important committees like rules or, appropriations or something like that. They might need to hold a quick meeting, but uh, for for the for the most part, the committee process is done, and they'll spend the rest of the session on the floor passing out those bills that have made it through committee or things that they need to get done outside of that process, um, such as the implementing bill and what have you. So we're closing in on it, but I also kind of look at it as, it's kind of like we're 2 weeks away from the end of school, and we've got 5 finals. We've got a thesis due, and all of our professors are crazy. So um, we're almost there, but lots can happen in these final 2 weeks. Let me go back over our bills here. These first two, these construction defect claims, we've gone ahead and changed that back to oppose because they are literally all over the place with these bills. Well, at least the House side it has been. Um, the Senate passed this out, not this past week, but the week before. It's in messages to the House. It reduces the statute of repose from 10 years to 7 years. It exempts single family residents from the fraudulent concealment part, which is open ended. And, a claim can be made at any time in the future as long as it's made within 1 year after they find the problem that they feel will be fraudulent. I was speaking to an attorney that I've worked with for a number of years, works for the Associated General Contractors, and that's where I knew him. He was our contract lobbyist back then. One thing he says that's a real problem with this one, and even the 15-year statute of repose, is even though it's a very high bar to meet when they say you have to have clear and convincing evidence, the fact that you're being accused of fraud, causes you insurance problems, and you may be in a position where the insurance company is not defending you. So it's coming out of the company's pocket, and the trial lawyers know if they can get you in that position, that they just keep running the tab up, and you'll settle. You won't want to go through the expense of going to trial. So that's the fear of the contractors. There's a lot of people fighting this. It's kind of unclear at this point, kind of where we're going here. Some people are saying it's not going to make it through the House, and it might be over. Although I look at it, and they've kind of come, pretty close. But the House again has been back and forth. They started out with pretty simple, you know. Process for the alternative dispute resolution, and making some corrections there, and dropping the statute of repose. Um, that's kind of all been fixed. And then they said they were going to repeal Chapter 558. They put that in the bill. Then at the next stop, they took it back out. Now they've put it back in. So the House bill, as of now, would repeal Chapter 558. Again, for those that have been part of these conversations, 558.0035 is the liability protections for individual engineers. So we told them, we didn't care so much about the rest of 558, which is the right to cure process, the alternative dispute resolution, that we didn't find that all that useful. So, but we needed 558.0035 to survive. So they have now put that in Chapter 768, 401, Section 401, the exact same language that was in 558. So we're good there. Still don't like this fraudulent concealment part, even though CLGR said if we have to accept 15 years, we would. We certainly don't want the open-ended thing that the Senate has right now. So again, the Senate bill is in the House. The House will take it up, or they'll take up their own bill and make changes, and it might bounce back and forth a couple of times, or the House might just give up on it and just let it go. So again, we're not real sure, but we're watching it real close. So we will. I think that one's coming up. Let me check real quick. 558. And that is not what I'm looking for. $583. Okay, so it's gone through the Judiciary Committee. That was just yesterday that it did. So it's on its way to the floor, but they haven't actually announced that it's ready for a floor vote of any kind. I would assume it'll show up, the House bill will show up on the second reading calendar next week. And then they'll start the process of either trying to get the two bills to match or to just drop it all together. So we'll keep an eye on that. Transportation project is another one that here right at the last minute, the House bill has changed somewhat. The Senate bill has been the exact same through the entire process. It's never been amended. It never has had any changes. It will coming up. The progressive design build contracts, which is what we've been watching, and there still stands at projects over 250 million in the Senate bill. It will be up on its final committee on the 28th at the beginning of next week, where we expect it to pass. We also expect, and we talk about this a little bit from time to time, but this bill has always had language on there that would put a cap on what seaports and airports and others can get from the trust fund on an annual basis, or a percentage of the annual revenue from the trust fund. Currently, it has to be 15%, and they're going to put a cap at 25%. Obviously, the seaports and the airports didn't like that. FDOT secretary said he wasn't very fond of that. They would like to have the flexibility in case that's needed. And so that has now been taken out of the House bill and will be taken out of the Senate bill. So that will no longer be a problem. The House bill has changed quite a bit, and it just changed this week, where they added in some things. They still have the progressive design build contracts for projects over $400 million, but they added in language that requires a mobility fee credit for certain planned housing communities where the local government would pay the credits for needed road improvements because of new communities. They've started implementing solutions for transportation research and evaluating emerging technologies living lab at the University of Florida to study transportation issues and to make recommendations. And there's a board that would be formed. Again, you can click on the blue HB 157 on the report. And Laura, if you haven't put that in the chat yet, please do. And you can see the whole bill. Again, our focus on this has always been the progressive design build contracts. The House bill will be on the special order calendar, meaning its first hearing in the full House on March the 1st. So that one's coming along. I think something will happen with those bills. It just depends on how far the Senate's willing to go. Like I said, they really haven't changed anything along the way, so I don't know exactly what they feel about mobility fee credits and creating this new living lab at UF. But those did get put in the House bill this week. So so we'll just we'll continue to monitor those. The Appropriations Committee, obviously, I'm looking back at the Senate bill. Obviously, meets on the 28th, so they should move that out of there and it be going to the Senate floor. Please jump in if you have any questions about any of these, and I'll do my best to answer it. The professional structural engineer license, again, the Senate has passed theirs through all the committees without a change through the entire process. So we'll see it show up on the floor probably next week. The structural engineer recognition program is what the House turned that into. It's not a license. It's not even a certification. It's just a recognition from the department or the Board of Professional Engineers that you passed the exam. And basically what the bill says is you can then use it in your, marketing program and on your brochures or in your website, and, what have you. So I don't think that's what the structural engineers are really looking for. They told me they thought that there was going to be some changes, but it just went through its last committee this week and without any changes. So I've said all along, I think this is about as far as the House is going to go. And, they're giving me no indication to think otherwise at this point. So, but I will keep an eye on that one. And then, the big ones, the mandatory building inspections. I'm going to skip one, go to 7042. I'm going to remove that from this report because it seemed like, in the beginning when they brought that out as a committee bill, 1702 was just the structural inspection part at that point. So they brought 7042, which included all of that language from 1702, brought it forward, added in all the stuff for reserves and record keeping and all that. So I thought that was going to be the bill, and it just hasn't moved. So this past week, they put all the reserve and record keeping and all that kind of stuff onto 1702. So I think we're back to that one as the bill. It has now passed all of its committees. It's in really good shape. I testified before the committee Wednesday that, we didn't get everything that we wanted in our recommendations, but we got the big things, and we were very happy with the bill as it is. Made a point to say that there's a couple of things in the House bill that we really need, that are in the Senate bill but are not in the House bill, that we really need to stay. So as they do their negotiations with the House, please do not let those go. Let me skip down to 7069. Not a bad bill. It does a lot of what we had asked for in our recommendations, but it's missing two critical parts. One is the qualifications of the person doing the inspection. The House bill simply requires that architect or engineer be licensed under their particular practice acts to perform these inspections. As you know, 471 doesn't license by discipline. There's structural engineers that are licensed under that statute. There's engineers that work in transportation and water resources and all kinds of different areas that are licensed under that statute. So that just kind of opens it up, and you actually create a conflict. And I've tried to explain this because the Practice Act says, you got to stay in your lane, so to speak. You can't move from one discipline to another, very easy. And if you start practicing in something that you've never practiced in before, you can get in some trouble. The House is kind of relying on that. And I'm saying, no, let's, please go with what the Senate has. It just makes it clearer, and especially makes it clearer for the persons that will be doing the hiring, your condo boards, and that your inspector has to have 5 years of structural design and 5 years of experience inspecting existing buildings. That might limit the number of people out there, but that's the people we have to have doing these inspections. Don't just leave it wide open to anybody that's licensed under 471. To us, that just doesn't work. And so we're still working on that. That's one of the things I testified about. I've done several interviews with different media organizations this week, and I bring that up, that those two things have to be in there. The other second thing being that the Senate bill, in the end, it sets up the structure for everything. You get your phase one inspection, your phase two inspection. The reports go to the condo board or to the owner, and they also go to the building official. The building official becomes responsible to make sure any recommended repairs are done. And then at the end, it goes to the Florida Building Commission to fill in all the details. Because the House is getting a little in the weeds on the details. We need that with the experts, because, part of the recertification of a building involves electrical inspections and some other things. So give it to them, let them, take care of all the fine points, or we're going to be in the legislature, every year from here on in, trying to fix little things once a year with this law, where the building commission, can take care of that easier. I know sometimes they're slow, sometimes we get frustrated with them, but that's where the experts are, and that's where this needs to go, and pretty much get it out of the hands as much as possible of the legislature. And that's missing from the House bill, and we want those two things. And so, we're talking with the Senate sponsor, please, in your negotiations, do not let this come out. There's some other little differences. We have 30 years for inland on both, but on the Senate bill, it's 20 miles if you're within 20 years if you're within 3 miles of the coast. It's 25 in the House bill. I mean, I think we can live with some of that stuff, whatever final numbers they come to. But these other two things we really need. Now, the rest of it, I think we've gotten fixed. The House had gotten into they were using terminology that's, defined in the Florida Building Code, or it's defined in international code or other places, maybe not in the statutes. But then you create a statute that's got a definition for that word, and you change everything and cause a lot of confusion. And I think we were able to get a lot of that fixed in the House bill. We're just still missing those two key parts. And so we continue to work on that. The House bill has fully passed the House and is over in the Senate in messages. It just passed. The Senate bill just passed its final committee on Wednesday, and it's going to the floor. So what will happen is when the Senate bill gets there, the House to the floor of the Senate, the House bill will be there. So they have a number of options that they can do in the Senate. They can just ignore the House bill, bring up their own bill and pass it and send it back to the House. Or they could take up the House bill, set theirs aside, take up the House bill, make some amendments to it to get it to their liking, send it back to the House. I don't think they'll do this. They could completely just lay theirs on the table, take the House bill, pass it, and it'd be done and on its way to the governor. I don't think that'll happen. Or they could take the House bill, strip all the language off of it and do a strike all amendment and put all the Senate language on it. So they've got a number of options that they can do, or that they have as they move forward. And so the fight for us becomes to make sure the pieces that are important to us remain in the bill, at least, what's in the Senate bill. And then obviously you got to add in, there's a lot of other players in this now, with your condo associations, insurance has weighed in, your lenders are weighing in that, one of the concerns that was raised in the committee meeting Wednesday was, the lenders are starting to require inspections, and we don't want all these inspections to start being duplicative. But until, we really see solid requirements from the lending industry or from the insurance industry, we really have no idea how to change our recommendations to accommodate that. So, I mean, we don't want that to happen, but they've been kind of quiet during this whole process, so we don't really know exactly what they're wanting to do. So a lot of stuff to do with that bill in the next 2 weeks. We are getting a lot of press coverage on it right now. Edie, you want to just take a quick moment and just talk about some things that have happened here in the past week or so?
Sure, absolutely. Alan is absolutely right. We have had a very strong amount of media coverage across the state. Throughout the week, we've had news outlets that have covered various aspects of the movement on the House side, and obviously, when it did pass out of the House, that's when we began to pick up additional coverage. Alan, I think a couple of things from an editorial standpoint on the opinion pages within newspapers. We have been pushing for newspapers to publish an editorial in support of passing the legislation. And of course, those efforts continue, but we have seen it published in the Tallahassee Democrat and also in the Florida Times-Union over in Jacksonville. Most importantly, though, yesterday I was able to connect Alan with the editorial board out of Miami, so the Miami Herald, and they are preparing to write their own editorial, and they wanted to talk with Alan about specifics so that they could get things right. Obviously, the Miami Herald's been very supportive of this particular legislation and helping ensure that we have strong building safety mechanisms in place. We have also picked up coverage through the News Service of Florida, which is essentially, it's kind of Florida's version of Associated Press, where they feed stories to news outlets throughout the state. And so that's been really helpful. from, ensuring that we're getting duplicative coverage in multiple markets throughout the state. Now, I will tell you that I fully anticipate once we get to the point where lawmakers fully pass this legislation out of the legislature, I anticipate that we'll pick up national coverage. But I really think more importantly, assuming that the governor will sign this into law, and I really can't see why he wouldn't. Um, when this is signed into law, I think we're probably likely back at the level of, or I anticipate we'll be back at the level of media coverage, international media coverage like we've received, at various points in this process. As I was sharing with Alan this week, this organization is really doing yeoman's work. I mean, this is kind of like the Lord's work, so to speak, with this particular legislation. And it's truly put FES and ACEC of Florida in the limelight in a very positive way about the great things that each of you do, and that your profession does. And so, this is just going to continue to be positive for the organization. And that's kind of just a quick recap, and plus a little editorial comment. So.
And I did do an interview as well this week with the Engineering News Record. So from that standpoint, we do have a little bit of national coverage at this point, but it's all come down to these two issues, that are not in the House bill. That's what I talked to ENR about. That's what I talked to the Miami Herald about. That's what I talked to the committee about on Wednesday in the Senate, that they've got it right. Don't change it. Keep it just like you got it. So that's really, there's no more arguing over whether we should or shouldn't do it, or what, this, that, and the other. There may be on the reserve side and that kind of stuff, but we've stayed out of that part of the fight. But we have done everything we can to say that these two issues need to be addressed in whatever bill passes. Again, on the qualifications of the inspector, that they just point back to the practice acts, and that everybody's supposed to stay in their lane anyway. But that's kind of where they go with that. On the building commission, it's kind of funny because they say, when we talk to staff in the House, they will say, well, we don't want it to go to the building commission because of all the regulations that they'll put on it. And at the time they were telling me that, I was sitting there looking at a bill where they actually had in their own bill that you had to send the report to the building official either by United States Postal Service or by email. There were no other options. And, that's a little deep in the woods on the regulation there, guys, to be crying about regulation, and they also had in there that, the report had to have an embossed seal. Well, you can't send an embossed seal by email. So they did change those things. We got a lot of that stuff corrected, but they still have these two items that, they argue back against, and they've been real stubborn about it. And the House is just that way. They despise regulations. And they almost get embarrassed when you point out to them that in your own bill that you've written there, you're being quite regulatory. But it is what it is. So we've got to deal with it. So it's in the Senate now. It's up to the Senate to deal with it. Hopefully we can get what we need out of them over there and get it back to the House and get them to agree and have this done. But we're hitting them every which way we can, through the media, through the committee process, however we could do it. And talking with the other stakeholders, everybody likes the Senate bill better. When I talk to the condo associations and their lobbyists from, various different groups, everybody likes the Senate bill better. So I think most of the people have gone to the Senate sponsor with the same message that, if you give up anything to the House, don't give up much, because your bill is very good. It's not the final product. We will have to, deal with this issue, in future legislative sessions, but, we can minimize that, by giving it to the Florida Building Commission, letting them deal with the details and just come back with, any major changes that need to be made, we'd come back to the legislature. So, we're doing what we can, and we'll see where it lands. Something's going to pass. I'll almost guarantee that. For those that don't know, we also did the question was also put in one of the latest Mason-Dixon polls, and I think it polled at about 86%, and that was across all lines. It didn't matter if it was men, women, black, white, Republican, Democrat. It didn't matter. It was right in that same range of the public that supports passing this legislation. So there's a lot of pressure on them right now, and as much as we can, we'll keep that screw pretty tight. So anyway, that's where we're at. We've had no new, unwelcome surprises, which actually surprises me. I figured we'd get more as the session went along. There's still 2 weeks. It can still happen. All somebody has to do is put up an amendment we don't like, and we're off and running. But so far, so good. Crickets. So would you have any questions? Any comments? Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
We hear you.
Yeah.
Great report,
All
Alan.
good.
I was wondering in the
Absolutely.
call earlier this morning, Jeff, Little John, his froze up. So I think he was still sitting in his office just talking away and didn't know that he was frozen on the screen. But anyway, if nobody has any questions or comments, we'll call it a meeting and let everybody go back to work, and we'll do it again next week. And, some of this stuff ought to be clearing up real good by Friday next week.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you,
Take
Alan.
care.
Thank you, everyone.
Alan,
Thanks,
everyone.
Alan. Thanks, Alan.